It's very helpful for people to hear that they should make themselves competent and dangerous and take their proper place in the world. Why dangerous? Because it's the alternative to being weak, and weak is not good. The people who shoot up the high schools, they're weak. How is it good to be dangerous? Because it makes you formidable, and life is a very difficult process. And you're not prepared for it unless you can be dangerous. That doesn't mean that you should be cruel. It doesn't mean any of that. There's a statement in the New Testament: the meek shall inherit the earth, but the meek aren't well translated. It means something more like those who have swords and know how to use them but keep them sheathed will inherit the world. That's a way better way of thinking about it. You have to be powerful and formidable, and then peaceful in that. That's not the same as being naive, weak, and harmless, which is what young men are being encouraged to be. It's a very bad idea, because naive, weak, and harmless means that you can't withstand the tragedies of life. You can't bear any responsibility. You'll end up bitter. And when you get bitter, then you get dangerous. There's a big difference between letting people do something for themselves and saying, men should be dangerous. By dangerous, that implies I should be ready to threaten someone to hurt somebody. No, you should be capable of it, but that doesn't mean you should use it. There's nothing to you otherwise. Like if you're not a formidable force, there's no morality in yourself. If you're incapable of violence, not being violent isn't a virtue. People who teach martial arts know this full well, right? If you learn a martial art, you learn to be dangerous, but simultaneously you learn to control it. Both of those come together, and the combination of that capacity for danger and the capacity for control is what brings about the virtue. Otherwise, you confuse weakness with moral virtue. I'm harmless, therefore I'm good. It's like, no, that isn't how it works. That isn't how it works at all. If you're harmless, you're just weak. And if you're weak, you're not going to be good. You can't be, because it takes strength to be good. It's very difficult to be good. You said that a harmless man is not a good man. A good man is a very dangerous man who has that under voluntary control. How should people become more dangerous? Oh, becoming more articulate is definitely, I would say that's the primary array of weapons. So I mean, physical prowess is something, and it's not anything that physical confidence that comes along with that as well. But the same thing replicated at the level of the ability to communicate and to think. That's a way broader field of battle and opportunity. So this is one thing that isn't taught well. It's more important to teach it to boys, I would say, because they're more skeptical of such the educational enterprise in general, generally speaking, partly because they're less obedient, partly because they're less agreeable. That's particularly true for disagreeable boys, and agreeable boys get higher grades independent of their IQ and their academic achievement because they're easier to deal with. So what do you tell disagreeable boys? There's nothing that makes you more formidable than verbal competence, than being able to articulate, be able to think, to marshal your arguments, right? It's a battlefield metaphor. Get everything in order. Get all your information. That's part of the reason that rap artists are so popular, especially among disaffected young men, black and white alike, because they're unbelievably articulate, right? They have this incredible verbal prowess. It's unbelievably attractive, and it's associated with genuine, artistic, and redemptive activity. Focusing on something that's approximately the voice of the underclass, let's say, but a powerful voice. Right. And it's interesting to see how many young guys identify with that. That you have an experience that many people struggle to articulate. You take the best of us, the one that has the most precise, most articulate language. You drop them in and you say, okay, show us what you've learned. This is the equivalent, but for just a different community, a different sort of life that maybe you can't describe. What it feels like to live in a council estate in Manchester or in, one of the neighborhoods of Brooklyn. And it feels like it's your voice, and you see in that, in rap music, in hip-hop, all of that alienation being given an articulated voice in an artistic sense. And that's a good example of the power of verbal facility. That's the root of, let's say, marketing education to young men. It's like you want to take your rightful place in the kingdom. It's like, get your tongue straight, man. Get it under control in the highest possible sense. The articulated voice of the struggling, but worthy underclass. I suppose that's a good way of putting it, but those who are alienated from their rightful. And so that verbal prowess is one of the ways they struggle up towards the light. And that's a good example of that, of having that danger under control. Anger is an energy, and John Lydon, he could channel that like almost no one I've ever seen. He'd get that anger built up inside him, and then it was completely under control, and he expressed it in his music. It's captivating and unbelievably charismatic. And I liked his music, that raw anger in the music. He transmuted that into something. You can argue about the poetic merits of punk rock, although I don't think you should.